Everyone has heard by now the conspiracy that at least 4 major celebrities from 2017 to 2018 were murdered because they were philanthropists to organizations exposing human trafficking, and perhaps they were going to be involved in the Silent Children documentary. Frontman Chris Cornell. Chris Cornell was the lead singer of Soundgarden from 1984 to 1997, and later he founded the band Audioslave. Frontman Chester Bennington, co-vocalist of Linkin Park. The DJ Avicii. And the celebrity TV host Anthony Bourdain from his show Parts Unknown.
What do you get after 6 continents, 1 president?
There we go. Life is good.
While there is no evidence to know if these celebs were involved in that documentary, and or had intentions to speak more for certain, there are still some strange coincidences to convict an opinion that they were murdered. Here's why. The crime scene suspects on involvement in criminal behavior are Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton and their Clinton Foundation, plus White House Chief of State and chair of Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign, John Podesta, and his involvement in the Pizzagate crimes, as they are the puppets of the powers that be. As always, we're going to dive into the cryptography, including numerical ciphers. Visit our calculator, ciphers.news, to try alphanumerology for yourself. Clinton Foundation equals Clinton body count at 206 ordinal. Guess what? Linkin Park have an album called The Hunting Party, which also equals 206. That sounds subliminal to us. From the day that Linkin Park's Hunting Party album came out to the date that Bill Clinton and Mike Shinoda are filmed visiting Haiti together is just a span of 2 months and 6 days. We have that 2 and 6 in the date duration, and in the 206 ordinal match, there are 26 letters in the English alphabet. What do y'all think, fellow truthers? Write us a comment down below, and if you're new here, hit the subscribe button to let us know your input on this conversation. Hey everyone, thanks for voting in our music poll. The topic of Chester Bennington, co-lead vocalist of Linkin Park, won the poll for the next video to decode, and we were asked about Chris Cornell too. Great point. Chris Cornell, lead vocalist of Soundgarden, and Audioslave-inspired Chester Bennington, and they were best friends. As we learned from researching their biographies, you might recall the major news headline in 2017 that they both allegedly committed suicide in exactly the same way, by hanging. Chris and Chester were in bands that were funded by the Clintons. We'll explain the evidence in each of their storylines in chronological order. We're starting to hypothesize a Clinton body count. In 2018, fashion designer Kate Spade was also found dead by hanging. Kate Spade and the Clintons have crossed paths in the context of Haiti. That same year, Anthony Bourdain also allegedly committed suicide by hanging, and Anthony Bourdain publicly criticized the Clintons. So we have a link here again to the Clintons. Our hypothesis is that the global New World Order run the Clintons, who are in collusion with Epstein's flight logs, and the powers that be authorize the murders that the Clintons facilitate. Anyone who is a threat to their secrets are executed, and their deaths ruled a suicide. Here's what the crime scene looked like for each alleged suicide. Let's begin to decode Chris Cornell's death first, as he was the first out of the bunch. First of all, Chris's birth name was Christopher Boyle, yet he changed it to Cornell after his parents' divorce. But Chris Cornell gives him 2 capital C's, or a 33, since C is the 3rd letter of the alphabet. It's also interesting that the clues have a crossword of Chris and Chester, which also gets us double C's, or 33. Chris died at 52 years old.
Clinton MGM Grand employee phoned police after Soundgarden frontman Chris Cornell was found dead inside a Detroit hotel room.
Yeah, that incident May 18th at the MGM Grand after the Soundgarden concert.
His body was found at the MGM Grand Hotel in Detroit. Get this, MGM equals 33 in ordinal, and we know that Chris Cornell from earlier has 2 capital C's, making a 33. Math experts are well aware that the 33rd prime number is 137. In ciphers, MGM Grand Hotel equals 137 ordinal, matching with the phrase mind control. This whole idea that Cornell suicided himself at the MGM Grand Hotel is looking more and more suspicious as we uncover these Freemasonic numbers that are apparent in every false flag event. 24 hours before his death, he had just performed a concert. At this concert, he had a visible gash on his head. The autopsy report says, along with a gash on his head, that Chris had 9 broken ribs,
I also found that a lot of videos that night of that concert were taken down. Most likely because of the high quality camera content of these videos that were taken down could verify that he had head trauma.
Chris Cornell had 9 broken ribs and a gash in the back of his head when he hung him. Yes. And they said the official story is from the CPR. The CPR, he was already dead when they got there, and they break 9 ribs doing CPR, and there's a gash behind his head.
There's a gash behind his head when they cut him loose and he bangs his head off the ground.
And he's hanging.
So, no, Joe. This was actually before he allegedly committed suicide, which is in none of the reports besides this one that confirms his head trauma. It states that his head trauma made him lose 100 to 500 milliliters of blood. 500 milliliters is equivalent to a whole water bottle of water. That's kind of a lot of blood. Now, this is the call that we all know of.
1777 3rd Street, the MGM Casino.
I also found this police recording at 1:30 that also states his head trauma.
Suggestions of possible strangulation, trauma to the back of the head.
We can also see that Chris had no head trauma at his previous concert 3 days before. And because of this report, we can verify that the head trauma did come from the night of his death.
Even so, there was never a homicide investigation. They declared it a suicide in less than 2 hours.
Tragically died of an apparent suicide. In fact, they say it was a suicide. But the pictures really triggered enormous interest. You know, he hanged himself.
What's wild is that Chris Cornell's bodyguard, Martin Kirsten, could have been the hired help responsible to take Chris out. And that Vicki Cornell, his wife, could have also been a handler in the operation.
Chris had a bodyguard for 10 years named Eloy, which pretty much has been wiped off the internet. Martin Kirsten became Chris Cornell's bodyguard in 2016, about a year before Chris Cornell died.
Chris signs autographs outside his hotel following Soundgarden's performance. He's accompanied by bodyguard Martin Kirsten. In his hotel room, away from the fans, Chris is agitated. Martin gives him 2 tablets and leaves.
Remember, Martin Kirsten was the last person to see Chris Cornell alive.
It's pretty crazy how you cannot find a lot of things on this guy, besides the fact that he was with Heidi Klum, who has been connected to Epstein.
After dating Heidi Klum, she gave him over $1 million and bought him a house in South Africa, so it's not like he didn't have anything to take away. Why isn't that Vicki never went after Martin Kirsten, the bodyguard? She tried to sue everybody, but not Martin. And we know he had assets. Let's take a look at the funeral photos. Honestly, Vicki looked way too happy at that funeral. I mean, I wouldn't be able to even fake a smile. There is a lot of questionable people at his funeral, like Courtney Love.
Watch our video titled The Truth About Kurt Cobain to learn about how Courtney Love could have been involved in Kurt's alleged suicide.
Vicki Cornell was always in charge of everything for their foundation. Back in 2015, Vicki contributed to Trainia Interactive. Trevor Trainia began his career at Seagram's, which is run by the Brofman family, linking to the NXVIM cult. Of course, Ron Burkle was a big funder of Trainia's, if only. He's been connected to Epstein and the Clintons, of course. Rita Wilson is the wife of Tom Hanks, and she was actually Chris Cornell's daughter's godmother. Now remember, Tom Hanks is how it all started. He was posting all these weird pictures on his Instagram with gloves, and a lot of them were kid gloves. Vicki Cornell's maid of honor was Dasha Abramovich. She's not related to Marina, but does it really matter? They're still friends. Here's Vicki's maid of honor again with David Geffen and Oprah. David Geffen is a billionaire. His net worth is worth $8 billion. So Interscope Records, which he owns, do you guys see this symbol up top? Does it look familiar? Looks just like the dot for the eye for David Geffen's record label, Interscope Records. So I did this in like 15 minutes, and there's a lot more people I need to put on here, but basically just want to show you guys how they were surrounded, Chris and Chester were surrounded by these elite pedos.
Misery chain is just about being aware that slavery, the way we think of it classically, doesn't exist. It does exist. That human trafficking still exists, and it happens all over the world, and it can happen in front of your eyes. So be aware. If you see anything like it, do the right thing.
Why does dead by hanging equal MGM Grand Hotel in the reduction cipher? Is that just a coincidence, or is it numeric karmic bypass? We don't want to sound any alarms, but why does Martin killed Chris equal Clinton murders at 185 Ordinal? Let's move on to Chester Bennington's death. Chester died on the anniversary of Chris Cornell's what would have been his 53rd birthday. Between when Chris and Chester died is a span of 2 months and 2 days, or 63 days. In the reduction cipher, fabricated deaths and death by suicide equals 63.
One of the biggest things to question is the fact that the width of the abrasion does not match the width of the belt that was used to hang himself. And the weird thing is, he still had his belt on and it was unbuckled, so he chose to use a different belt to do the hanging. Another weird thing is that Chester was 4 inches taller than the door he chose to hang himself on. His bags were found packed because he had a photo session with Linkin Park the next morning, so why would he choose that timing? The really weird 911 phone call that sounds exactly like Mike Shinoda. Check it out.
If there is a mistake that somebody might be looking at somebody else's hands or somebody else's face.
So that he unfortunately killed himself?
And that makes, doing different things makes you feel, and that makes, doing different things makes you feel,
was trying to pick up, and his housekeeper came out and said that.
Remember, it was Mike Shinoda who got the grant from Bill Clinton for $250,000 to help out in Haiti. Is it really that crazy to think that he would make a deal with Bill Clinton? I mean, he was never in the spotlight the way that Chester was.
I don't know if most people have seen long-form contracts. They're insane, and there's all these little things thrown in. It's kind of like legislature for a government. They put up this big issue, but underneath that issue, there's like 17 other little laws that they threw in that they're not talking about. So when you say yes to this one thing, you're actually saying yes to like 45 other things.
The media wanted you to think that Chester was suicidal and depressed, but they don't actually go over all the actions that justify quite the opposite. But even after Chris Cornell died 10 days later, who was like a brother to him, I believe he was trying to lead by example, and he was in no way, shape, or form suicidal. Even Talinda Bennington has profited off of mental health from the World Health Organization, talking about Chester Bennington.
My sister Talinda, she has advised and supported so many others who are either suffering with their mental health or have lost a loved one to suicide. Talinda, I'm delighted to present you with the D.D. Hirsch Erasing the Stigma Mental Health Ambassador Award.
Hi, my name is Talinda Bennington, and I'm so honored to be this year's recipient of the 2020 Mental Health Ambassador Award. In July of 2017, I lost my husband, the father of my children, Chester Bennington, to suicide.
If Talinda Bennington, Chester's wife, was interested in uncovering the inconsistencies in her husband's 2017 death, would she be accepting an award from Dr. Tedros Adhanom, the Director General of the World Health Organization? Talinda met with Dr. Tedros around the 24th of April 2020, just 1 month after the WHO declared COVID an international pandemic, and the same year that Dr. Tedros would be facing genocide charges filed by a Nobel Peace Prize nominee. A criminal complaint was filed with the International Criminal Court against the Director General of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, with responsibility for genocide and crimes against humanity as a top Ethiopian official before leading the WHO. Was Talinda not deep in the web? For your consideration, just hours after Chester Bennington's death, his grieving widow, his wife, Talinda Bennington, who was a former Playboy model by the way, was targeted by a hacker who took control of her Twitter account and posted curious tweets about her. The tweets reportedly claimed Talinda Bennington, for one, that she had an affair with Linkin Park member Mike Shinoda. The tweet allegedly read, "I guess this is the time to say it, but I have been cheating on Chester with Mike Shinoda." The hacker also tweeted under Talinda's account, "He didn't kill himself. He was already dead. Perhaps a misspelling or typo of dead. Before he hung himself, I have proof." The tweets from Talinda's account get worse. "I encouraged him to kill himself. I told him no one cared. We all move on fast. I'm glad he killed himself. I love Mike." Mike's bleep was better in my opinion. Finally, the account allegedly posted a tweet denying hacking, saying, "I never really loved him, and I'm not hacked. I just was in love with the money, hurts to say." Who was this hacker? Who do you think the hacker was? Option 1. Was it Talinda herself on a schizoid rant? and then the media had to do damage control. Option 2. Was it a real hacker that was trying to blow the whistle because they knew the truth? Option 3. Was it Mike Shinoda himself, or another government plant playing controlled opposition to deflect from being snooped on by fans? Let's illustrate it this way. Do you recognize what this photo shoot of Talinda and Mike is from?
And we lost our very real friend.
Over 1 million people have thoughts of suicide each year. Know the signs of emotional suffering.
Reach out with support and connect.
And if you're struggling with thoughts of suicide,
please call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline.
1-800-273-8255.
Prior to this campaign, Talinda had been, quote, hacked, unquote, with tweets reading, "I have been cheating on Chester with Mike Shinoda. What else? I love Mike and Mike's bleep was better in my opinion. So Talinda, what are you doing?" Months after Chester's funeral, filming a commercial with the Suicide Prevention Action Alliance in 2017 and allowing Mike Shinoda to hug you. Is that not of poor judgment? Shill meets shill with the Shill report. Suicide prevention is an important cause, yet the PSA becomes propaganda when it's negating a homicide investigation. Regardless of how those tweets were leaked, ex-Playboy model screams that Talinda Bennington, Chester's second wife, was a government-funded handler. No offense. Backing this claim up, we hold the card that Chester's first wife, Samantha Bennington, penned a scathing Facebook post alleging that she and Chester's 15-year-old son were excluded from the funeral proceedings. The post read, "I'm so disgusted on so many levels. My son, Draven, and I have not had an opportunity to speak, not even at his funeral. His parents were not mentioned in the program. His siblings were not mentioned. Even his own children were not listed on the program," she continued. "It was a disgusting delusional display on all people who spoke at the funeral and their characters," Samantha wrote, adding, "Karma is real."
Even Talinda Bennington has profited off of mental health from the World Health Organization, talking about Chester Bennington. Birds of a feather flock together. Chester and Chris were both surrounded by all of these elite pedos. You can see that Chester was connected to Kevin Spacey. Kevin Spacey was connected to Courtney Love, Harvey Weinstein, Bill Clinton. About 4 months before Chester died, he had actually hung out with Kevin Spacey. Spacey has a history, just like the Clintons do. The 3 people that have accused Spacey have all died. What a coincidence. Sounds like the Clintons aren't the only ones with a hit list. Oh look, here he is with Ghislaine Maxwell. When you're this powerful of a person, you can literally get away with murder.
Chester murdered equals 166 ordinal, like murder by hanging, Clinton murder, the White House and secret society. Chester Bennington equals 192 ordinal, like Chris and Chester death, as well as Silent Children film. What sets the Chester controversy apart from any other celebrity publicly exposing human trafficking is the detail in the conspiracy about Chester's alleged biological father. The internet conspiracy is claiming that Chester Bennington looks so much like John Podesta, the Clinton hire that started the Pizzagate scandal, in their facial features, and that there's also evidence that could prove they are related. The story goes that John Podesta was the former White House counselor for Bill Clinton and chairman of the Hillary Clinton 2016 campaign. Meanwhile, recent Epstein flight logs show proof that when Bill Clinton was president from 1999 to 2001, he took trips on Jeffrey Epstein's jet. While there is no evidence that Hillary Clinton joined him, she is still married to him.
One of the biggest names that was released in the court document was former President Bill Clinton. It is reported on these documents that Bill visited Jeffrey's infamous island not once, but several times. It is rumored that he visited the island on at least 26 occasions. Now you tell me what you think Bill was possibly doing on the island and why you think he kept on going back. Bill is just another Masonic puppet. Bill, like Walt Disney, was a member of the Masonic Demolay organization. The Demolay is a Masonic youth organization for teens to the age of 21. This Masonic youth program is usually for children of Freemasons, meaning Clinton comes from a family of Masons. The Demolay is where they prepare these puppets from childhood to become perfect Masonic puppets in adulthood. The next person on the list we need to talk about is Bill Clinton's wife, Hillary. While it is unclear if Hillary was on the island with her husband, Epstein's documents still named her as an associate of Jeffrey. In my opinion, I believe she knew exactly what was going on that island and what her husband was doing attending that island. I myself would be zero amount surprised if it is released that she was on that island with her husband and participated in those activities. Even though these two were named on the document, I can almost guarantee you they won't face any consequences for their involvement. The Clintons' involvement will most likely be explained off as some business dealings when we all know just what business Jeffrey was in. These two will walk away scotch-free.
There is a Clinton body count list. Check what the real Matrix Trinity posted.
Have you guys heard of the Clinton body count? Basically, anybody that has ever tried to go against them or out them ends up on this list. And I'm sure there's some people missing from it too, but it's kind of suspicious and crazy that all of these people are on this same list. I mean, what are the odds?
He was declared the front runner for the New York Senate seat back in 1999. Days later, his plane crashed into the Atlantic Ocean, and his rival, Hillary Clinton, was elected senator.
For example, John F. Kennedy Jr. was the frontrunner for the New York Senate seat back in 1999. Days later, his plane crashed into the Atlantic Ocean, and his rival Hillary Clinton was elected senator instead. That seems really oddly suspicious. The list goes on. Would it be any stretch at all to say Chester and his best friend Chris were added to the Clinton body count list on the counts of if Chester was John Podesta's biological son? Chester Bennington's parents on public record are Susan and Lee Bennington. They divorced when he was 11 years old due to infidelity and a failed marriage. So the only evidence I could find that supported the claim that Chester Bennington is John Podesta's son is this. First of all, we have to understand that John Podesta was involved in Pizzagate controversies over illegal behavior when he was chairman of the Hillary Clinton 2016 presidential campaign. WikiLeaks released a trove of emails from Podesta's account which contained sensitive information about Clinton campaign staff and strategy. The release of these emails were seen as a major blow to the Clinton presidential campaign, and it was the spark of the Pizzagate scandal. Within the emails were discussions that include the word pizza, including dinner plans between Mr. Podesta and his lobbyist brother Tony. Podesta, a participant on 4chan, connected the phrase cheese, pizza to illegal language because on chat boards the initials CP were exposed as code words to denote what illegal preferences the elite have. The theory started snowballing, taking on the meme hashtag Pizzagate. Theories about kill rooms, underground tunnels, Satanism, and even cannibalism emerged, basically a modern-day Baal or Moloch worship crisis. The police refuted the claims of an online crime ring running out of Comet Ping Pong, but the theories continued. Well, even if John Podesta isn't Chester's real father, it is true that the Clintons and their Pizzagate controversies were funding Linkin Park. The Clinton Foundation and Linkin Park had a number of interactions over the years, which was a super shock to me as a fan, and it is terrifyingly suspicious. Learning about this gave me the chills, and we have seen evidence to believe his bandmate Mike Shinoda was one of his primary handlers. If you're new to the story of Linkin Park's origins, here's a timeline of how Chester Bennington joined Mike Shinoda's Linkin Park. At first, Mike Shinoda formed the band. In 1999, Chester gets recommended by an A&R rep, and he successfully auditions for the band. So, was the artist and repertoire representative assigned to Network Chester with his new handler Mike Shinoda? Remember, it was Mike Shinoda that got the grant from Bill Clinton. In 2009, Linkin Park joins the Clinton Global Initiative. Pizzagate got exposed in 2016, only 1 year before 2017 when Chris and Chester were murdered. So it was all so much more hush-hush back then than it is now. Remember, it wasn't until much later in 2019 that Epstein Island went viral. So in conclusion, even if Chester Bennington was not Clinton chairman John Podesta's biological son, he was still handled on record by A&R artists. In 1999, Chester gets recommended by an A&R rep who volunteered Chester to audition for Linkin Park, and he successfully auditions for the band. Later that year of 1999, Zero officially changes their name to Linkin Park, and they sign a record deal with Warner Brothers Records, whilst the founding member of Linkin Park, co-lead vocalist Mike Shinoda, accepted grants from the disgraced financiers and former President Bill Clinton and his wife Hillary Clinton. And since it is a fact that the Clintons were financially involved with Linkin Park, it is a huge possibility Chester Bennington ended up on the Clinton body count list. Chris Cornell, in our opinion, was also on the Clinton body count list by proxy of being Chester's best friend. Chris had a huge influence on Chester's life, so much that Chester tweeted, "With all of my love, Chris Cornell. I can't imagine a world without you." Well, with Chris Cornell in the spotlight, with the Chris and Vicky Foundation, you could imagine his influence if he was alive to sway opinion. If he had been alive during the Epstein case later in 2019. What's recognizable from the news forums were circulating pamphlets claiming that Chris, Chester, Avicii, and Bourdain were working on financially funding a documentary titled The Silent Children to expose global child trafficking. But fact checkers are the first thing that appear when you Google it, saying, "No, this is not true. The elite control the media and control the narrative. Nothing to see here. Well, except even fact-checker articles provide some details they hope readers miss. Like how it is a fact that The Silent Children was a real documentary. You can watch the trailer for it online. A few facts that went viral on social media. The source of the theory is allegedly a single tweet or X post from an account called An Open Secret. The post read, Chris Cornell was the main financial backer for a documentary, The Silent Children, about trafficking. After he died, the project was canceled. Chester Bennington was going to appear in the documentary. Linkin Park was going to contribute music. First, go to the Chris and Vicki Cornell Foundation website. Under About, it says, the foundation was formed in 2012 to raise funds and to support charitable organizations serving children who are facing homelessness, poverty, abuse, and neglect worldwide. It is registered as a non-profit corporation. Secondly, one of the key production companies for this film was Jelly Bean Productions. Jelly Bean Productions was owned by Lisa Bean and her husband Leroy Moore, who was the saxophonist from the Dave Matthews Band. Third, what fact doesn't add up is that this documentary on IMDb says it was produced in 2013, whilst the conspiracy insists the crew were imminently about to contribute to a documentary in the future. To deduce from these three facts, we believe we can subtract the Silent Children out of the equation and focus on how Chris Cornell did run a charity with the exact same mission statement as the movie The Conspiracy revolves around. Chester also contributed to charities, for example. Avicii, whose real name is Tim Bergling, raised awareness through music as well. He released 2 music videos, For a Better Day and Pure Grinding, that explicitly addressed the realities of trafficking and exploitation and donated to charities. Throughout Anthony Bourdain's shows like Parts Unknown, Bourdain frequently highlighted vulnerable communities and individuals, often shedding light on the realities of trafficking. So does this equate to that any celebrity with philanthropic interest in trafficking is targeted by the world players? Let's look at other rumored related deaths and see if they were also on the Clinton body count. Avicii died next. Avicii's manager was a record label owner called Ash Poonruri. Both Poonruri and the Clinton Foundation have involvement with Global Citizen, an international advocacy organization. Poonruri has participated in some of their events, while the Clintons are co-founders and prominent figures within the organization. So yes, Avicii, another on the body count that can be traced to the Clintons, also an alleged suicide. The last pictures of Avicii showed him relaxing with fans at the Muscat Hills Resort in Oman, where he had been staying before he passed away. Muscat Hills equals 137 ordinal, like MGM Grand Hotel, where Chris Cornell was murdered, and of course like the phrase mind control. But DJ Avicii reportedly spent his last hours alive at an extravagant farmhouse owned by the Sultan of Oman. It's alleged he died at this private Muscat farmhouse surrounded by palm trees. That quote is straight out of the Mirror website. Quote, surrounded by palm trees. Unquote. Epstein reference. The Sultan of Oman, who owned the house Avicii died in, is called Qaboos bin Said Al Said. He ruled the country from 1970 to 2020. On the history.state.gov website, you can see that Hillary Clinton met with Sultan Qaboos in 2011, so who knows how much collusion there was between them. Fashion designer Kate Spade died on the 5th of June 2018. She had hanged herself using a scarf and allegedly left a note. Kate, along with her husband Andy Spade, co-founded the Spade Foundation in 2006. In 2012, the Spade Foundation partnered with Clinton Global Initiative, an initiative founded by former President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. So we have a link here again to the Clintons. 3 days after Kate Spade's suicide was Anthony Bourdain's. Anthony Bourdain criticized Bill Clinton for his handling of the Monica Lewinsky scandal and called him entitled. So yes, it looks like Anthony Bourdain was definitely suicided. From Chris Cornell to Anthony Bourdain's, death is a span of 12 months and 3 days. Conspiracy equals 123 ordinal. Celebrities murdered equals 195 ordinal, which matches music industry. Exposed Pizzagate and Silent Children docu. From Avicii's death to Anthony Bourdain's death is a span of 1 month and 19 days. Adrenochrome equals 119 ordinal.
Avicii, Chester, Chris, Anthony Bourdain, they were all silenced for trying to come out and tell you what's going on in the Hollywood industry. One of the biggest reasons these elites are pedos is because of this drug right here.
She says that adrenochrome retrieval is responsible for the purpose of the elites hiding human trafficking. We live in a reality in which Chris, Cornell, Chester Bennington, and many other benevolent, talented celebrities have been groomed from early on in their careers, signing contracts with malicious record companies and being manipulated and threatened into death sentences. Regardless or not, if the celebrities were actually going to speak out or not, it is all very sinister that the Clintons were involved in the Pizzagate scandal through John Podesta's leaked emails, and that John Podesta looks so much like Chester Bennington that it's really so strange that the Clinton Foundation funded Linkin Park projects. It's so weird that Chester Bennington dies a year after the 2016 Clinton and Podesta campaign, right when these topics were coming to light. Chester was a vocal survivor of horrific child abuse that many think link back to the Podesta conspiracy. From the last Linkin Park album, titled One More Light, to Chester's death is a span of 63 days, including end date. Between when Chris and Chester died is a span of 2 months and 2 days, or 63 days. In the reduction cipher, fabricated deaths and death by suicide equals 63. It's worth noting that Chester appeared and theatrically dies in one Saw film, titled Saw 3D. This movie was released in theaters on October 29th, 2010, a day with 63 days remaining left in the year. Again, the reduction cipher, fabricated deaths and death by suicide equals 63. So you get the picture of how the Illuminati, gang stalkers, operate, right? It's almost such a similar pattern every time. Here's the archetypes to gang stalking, extortion, and getting away with murder. Men in black agents, gold-digging wives, girlfriends or women, aka honeypots or femme fatales. In Chris and Chester's case, we have the gold-digger wives, Vicki Cornell and Talinda Bennington. Then of course actual gangsters or bodyguards. The life-threatening bodyguard, Martin Kirsten, whilst most importantly, a backstabbing best friend or colleague, Mike Shinoda.
It seems anybody who tries to spread truth ends up silenced. Chris, Chester, Avicii, Anthony Bourdain, they were all silenced for trying to come out and tell you what's going on in the Hollywood industry.
As a disclaimer, I briefly met and shook hands with Chester Bennington in person, thanks to a freelance camera opportunity I had. I met both Chester and Mike Shinoda filming an interview between them and a radio station in Chicago, Illinois. This day that I met Chester was August 29th, 2014. I was only 22 years old when I met him, and I was 25 years old when I learned that he passed away. His death was claimed as a suicide. His death could have been prevented. He was the most humble, driven, and honest person I had ever heard speak. I learned about gematria and the occult much later, when I was finally 27. If only I had known before, and could have interrupted and asked him for any clues. It's taken me years to mourn Chester's death. It is universe-shattering to have met your favorite musician, and for them to be the subject of such a seriously disturbing conspiracy and victim to government murder. In the end, it matters. Thanks for watching, and comment any clues.